Right. So, well, good morning, everybody. If you're signed in already, then you're obviously keen, wherever you happen to be today. Just so that you know that it does happen. The weather's lovely here in Wellington, despite what people might say. So, yeah, we'll just see how many people have we got in. Oh, we've got quite a crowd today, which is good to see. And more coming in, so welcome everybody. So today, as we usually do every month, is another of the RPMA webinars. The purpose of these is obviously to educate. A sideline is to possibly entertain, because that does support education, and to get you clued up on some of the finer points of your profession, which is property management. And it is a profession. And should be recognized and treated as such. So, because it's important work that property managers and landlords do. So, what do we got? Give it another minute or so. Like I say, every month we do a live webinar, and you can also get a recording of it emailed to you afterwards, which is handy as a piece of reference information for you. So check out on the website what the next webinar is. We do 10 a year. This is number 8. And today's subject, which I'm sure is attracting lots of people, is the healthy homes rabbit hole and shooting the rabbit, which we'd all love to do. And so we have a speaker today, and his name is Adam Gordon. And Adam is the co-founder and director of All Clear, and he'll explain what All Clear does way better than I do, but they have a comprehensive understanding of healthy homes and how to get people to get their properties compliant, which is increasingly an important thing, and it's just a bullet that you can't dodge. So some of you may know Adam from the RPMA conference in July, which we had in Auckland, so he won't be an unknown face to you. Good morning, Adam. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Richard. That was a great introduction.
Oh, no worries at all. Well, look, I'm going to hand over to you, but as we rock and roll along, if anybody has any questions, and please do ask the questions, because it does make things more lively, and you learn more just by doing that. And we'll deal with questions as they come up. So take it away, Adam.
Awesome. Well, that was a pretty good introduction. I think so. Here's the thing: we've been doing this now. Been in business for 9 years. We'll celebrate our 10th anniversary in 2026. So a lot of experience in the business. We started providing healthy home services in 2019, September 2019. So we're basically 6 years in now. Over that period of time, we have assessed just under 60,000 properties, which is a massive number. And if I think back to the time when we were designing the service, basically, we locked ourselves in a room for a couple of weeks, and we tore apart the legislation, we tore apart the regulations. If I asked myself at that time if I had any idea it was going to be such a big part of our business and such a comprehensive project, there's no way I ever would have foreseen that. So 6 years on, massive amount of experience, lots of key learnings, obviously. But still going strong. And I think that regardless of which way you might see the world politically, I think that there's definitely some ability to debate around some of their timelines, and some of them being a little bit maybe aggressive in some cases, and some of the categories being a bit marginal in terms of the justification. But putting that aside, regardless of which way you see the political landscape, healthy homes is a good thing for both tenants, property managers, and landlords alike. So that's something that we remain very positive about. And ultimately, what we want is high quality housing. And certainly when you have high quality housing, that typically results in better rental outcomes. But also down the track, if selling is on the agenda for the owner of that property, selling a property that's spec'd to a higher level opens it up to not only investors but also potentially owner occupiers. So I think all of that is a good thing. I do think when we threw the pandemic into the mix, it was a bit of a challenge. No one could have anticipated COVID, how much havoc COVID-19 would play out into our society, but there were some challenges there. But 6 years on, we're sitting on around about 90-something% compliance. So we're pretty happy with that. But it is an ongoing subject. And, one of the messages we got asked the other day to provide some feedback to government. And one of the things we said to them recently is, hey, look, and here's the thing, as an industry, we need to be really, really clear that this has been a massive, massive project, unprecedented in the rental space. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of heat pumps installed, hundreds of thousands of properties with insulation upgraded, draft stopping, general maintenance and repairs to bring things up to standard. Absolutely unprecedented, and it's been a 6-year mammoth project. But the key thing is moving forward is we've made some great gains. We've increased the quality of our housing for rentals, but what we need to make sure we do moving forward is that we don't lose those gains that we've made, and those properties are they're continuing to be a great rental property. And they maintain that compliance moving forward. So that's one of the key things that we're sort of saying. We don't want to lose those. We don't want to see those gains that have been made over the last 6 years lost. Because compliance is, by definition, it's a journey, not a destination. So in terms of, obviously, we've just passed the most recent final toll gate, which was obviously 30 June, 1 July. And with that, we've seen a massive shift in the topic around, hey, look, I'm running out of time. I need to get compliant. And of course, right up until the 30th of June, there was, obviously a decreasing number of days, but wind back 120, up to 120 days of allowable to get compliant. Obviously, with the passing of that toll gate, that no longer applies. So now the conversation is, particularly in a slightly challenging rental market where it's harder to rent things, perhaps the time to rent is increasing, certainly in some of the markets that we're operating in. That's the feedback we're getting. It's harder to find, it's harder to get that rent that the owner might want. It's harder to find a perfect tenant that the owner might want. So those are all challenges. So timing becomes such a critical thing, lining up. Signing a new property manager to the property, finding tenants, getting the compliance stuff all done in advance before the tenancy actually starts can be quite a difficult thing in terms of juggling all of those different things. So timing becomes super, super critical. But certainly the focus now is shifting towards how do we demonstrate ongoing compliance? How do we've made these great gains over the last 6 years. How do we show that we are maintaining that compliance, for each tenancy moving on in perpetuity? So we can share some insights there, but that's really where the conversation's heading now. And again, it's really important as an industry that we set expectations with owners that compliance isn't a one and done. It's not a one-time thing. You do need to be able to demonstrate that the property is compliant at all times during the tenancy. So that becomes, we've got some insights that we can share there.
There's one point that I think is important is that I am aware that MB are doing more audits on property managers and private landlords, and they're getting picky. They're getting really detailed picky about labeling insulation and recording that. I don't know if anybody's aware that they're really getting quite strict.
Yes, yeah. We typically have a client of ours being audited on average about once a week. The feedback to us, and obviously, which is often driven from bond lodgements. But in some cases, there's a lot of beneficial conversations around, hey, look, you could be doing this slightly better. This is obviously to the property manager, of course, but they are taking a very active view on auditing. And in the past, certainly before 2025, the the focus of the audits were around, hey, bond compliance, insulation, smoke alarms, and then what we've seen in 2025 is that focus shift more towards the wider healthy homes topics, which
Yeah.
is kind of to be expected given, 2025 has represented the final toll gate.
Yeah. Would you say that healthy homes standards have improved or are improving rental property stock?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you'll probably be familiar with the survey that we commenced in June. I'll talk a little bit about the stats of that. So we've always had anecdotal feedback, but we've never
Hmm.
had rock solid data. So, we've had conversations with Harden, we've had conversations with MB, and we've had conversations with big industry players, but we've always only really been able to provide anecdotal feedback. We haven't had rock solid data to rely on. So we
Right.
commissioned the Healthy Homes Survey in June. We sent it as far and wide as we possibly could, including to our entire client base. And we felt the timing was right, obviously approaching the final tollgate. We received over 2,045 submissions to that survey, which is really way above what we thought, which is really good. 94% of them were property managers, so it's a huge skew towards property managers. So that represents about 40% of professional residential property managers in the country.
Hmm.
Really happy with that. And one of the things they said is I think I'll just pull the stats up. They said that 80% of respondents genuinely believe that healthy home standards make tenants better off. And it really shows that compliance isn't about penalties. It's more around creating a safer, warmer, drier home, which ultimately is going to be easier to rent, more attractive to tenants, command better rents. There's a whole lot of really beneficial stuff that goes with it. And that was one of the key things that we saw from the survey. So that was a lot higher than we thought it was going to be. We thought we were going to see a little bit of skepticism coming through the survey results, which is not what we saw at all.
What's your thought on landlords that self uh, comply? They tick the boxes for
Yeah,
compliance.
look, we've seen a lot of that. The vast majority of properties in New Zealand are still DIY managed.
Yeah.
It's more or less the exact opposite between Australia and New Zealand. Obviously New Zealand's sort of 60, 70%
Mm.
professionally managed. New Zealand is pretty much the polar opposite. So we see a lot of owners doing it themselves, and to be fair, there's probably plenty that have done a reasonable job of it, but I would suggest that the vast majority of owners that have done it don't understand it. And even if they do, the temptation is just so great for them to give themselves exemptions. I've had so many conversations with owners over the last 6 years that kind of say, well, and the argument usually starts with, oh, look, I raised my family there, 20 years ago. It's now a rental property. It was fine then, it's fine now. The 5% window thing is just silly. Oh, I don't need a moisture barrier, and not really being able to back up any of those arguments. And it's going to
Yeah.
make for a pretty uncomfortable tribunal hearing if you roll up into tribunal and you're sort of sitting there as the owner and you're saying, well, I prepared the Section 13A statement, here it is, and I gave myself an exemption for this, and I gave myself an exemption for that, and, I haven't done this. That's going to make for a pretty difficult conversation in tribunal.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't,
So
and our advice to our professional property managers is that owners that want to do it themselves represent a bit of a risk. Don't get me wrong, there may be a decent quantity that understand what's required, have the ability and the skill set to do a reasonable job, but I'd suggest the majority of them either don't understand or aren't taking it seriously enough.
yeah, I do think there's a reasonable amount of DIY, the old number eight wire thing. Do you think it would be going too far to make the home standards compulsory by law?
What it is compulsory for residential rental properties,
I
right?
think I should have rephrased that. Yeah, as
Mm.
in getting an organization like your guys in to do this, rather than them self-medicating.
Yeah, I would stop short to say that that's necessary. And the reason for that is, New Zealand has a very strong DIY culture.
Yes.
You know, what we don't want as a society is we don't want to be told what to do in every single facet of our life. I think there's plenty of really good arguments to work with a professional, but I think there is a percentage of owners who just will not buy that at all. And if you try to ram it down their throats, it's going to be really problematic. I think it's our job as a key player in the industry to just do a better job of explaining why they should use a professional rather than have the government force them. That would be my view on it. I think that you know, there are a lot of very, very, very staunch private owners out there. You know, obviously there's all sorts of Facebook groups that talk about this stuff, and it's can be quite a dark corner of the internet. Some
Yeah.
of their views are relatively backwards around things like compliance, you know, tenants' rights. It makes for an interesting read, and I appreciate that they're probably the vocal minority, but there is enough of them that they're just very staunch around wanting to pretty much do everything themselves.
Mm.
So, you know, we've seen all sorts of stuff in our travels. We've seen, you know, renovations and repairs that really needed to be done by a licensed professional that haven't been done at all. And that's because the owner literally does everything themselves. And I get that the basics, absolutely, but yeah, I don't think the answer is mandating using a professional. I think that's our job to market ourselves as to the virtues of why you should rather than forcing people.
Right. Fair comment, actually. Yeah. Are there any traps for young players? And by that I mean, you know, there's always new people coming into the industry as property managers, and they're not going to know everything from day one. Obviously, they'll learn
Yeah.
from experience. But are there any traps for young players that you would highlight?
Well, let's answer that question in the opposite way. We work with property managers right across the spectrum, you know, businesses that have you know, 15, 20, 25,000 properties and in their portfolios, right down to a small independent that has 50. And we see businesses in that startup phase. And I think one of the things that we see really frequently is that if a business is in that startup phase and they might be a new player, or perhaps they're just going out on their own for the initial, for the first time, the one thing that we see are really strong signs of success is they take compliance really seriously from that early point in their and then building their portfolio, which means
Mm.
they're kind of almost hand picking the properties that are going into their portfolio. They're making sure that they're all up to a very high standard of compliance. All their documentation is in order, so it enables them to sort of scale and grow because they know that the foundation of their business, those initial managements that they brought on, are of a very high quality. So that's something that we see really, really positive. And I think that businesses that don't have perhaps legacy systems and legacy processes can choose some pretty cool technology to take care of that stuff from day one. And it's actually quite amazing to see how quickly some of those newer operators have grown because they haven't had any of that sort of older technology, which is maybe doesn't talk nicely to some of the other different technology platforms in the industry. You know, I've seen portfolios grow from, you know, a handful of properties in the very beginning to well over 200 in a year or two, which is a very impressive, you know, outcome. And if you look at the quality of their rentals and the relationships that they have with their owners, you're just thinking, wow, that's a viable business, and you've built
Yeah.
it over a very small period of time. So I think that the technology choices that they make and the fact that they take compliance quite seriously from the beginning is a really powerful tool.
I am aware that there's a bit of a gap to bridge for private landlords who can't use um, the tools that professional property managers have available, just because they're not economically viable.
Mm,
And I see that as a good direction, moving away from the DIY, you know, collect the rent
absolutely.
on Friday night. Something that's always irked me.
Yeah,
So
but I think it's a good reason to come to a professional to get access to some of those tools.
yeah, it is. It is. So yeah, with my company, I've been through three audits with MB. In fact, one of them, the two of them were just a quick email saying, show us the paperwork for, you know, 2 or 3 properties. That's easy. But a full audit where they come and sit with your admin and go through your records for the day is
Yeah.
quite daunting. It's You
Yeah,
feel
it's
like
time
you've been,
consuming. Yeah, yeah. And it's,
you feel
you
like
know,
you've
you
been
really
turning
want all the
yourself.
information at your fingertips
Hmm.
when that happens because, it's the very nature of an audit can be quite stressful.
Yes.
The good news is certainly from the feedback we get, unless there's a really egregious breach of process, they're usually pretty friendly about it and
Yeah.
quite professional. And it's not a high stress environment unless there's been some really serious breaches. But it's still not something that you want to be doing every day. And when it does happen, you want to be able to provide the information in a timely fashion. And you kind of
Yeah.
you want to come out of the process kind of go, hey, well, we actually did really well. Let's give ourselves a pat on the back, not dread the next time you get another call from the investigations team.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there anything that we've missed in this conversation? Because I'm looking at you as the expert in your field. I've got a more general view.
Yeah, look, so the biggest thing that we're getting asked right now is how do you demonstrate ongoing compliance? What is a reasonable period of
Mm,
time between between assessments? And obviously there's regulation 40.1 in the Healthy Homes Standards, which basically says you must keep and maintain records of evidence of ongoing compliance. So that in practical terms basically means that you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're compliant at all times. And
mm,
the issue with that is, particularly as tenancies are starting to last longer, which is a good thing because we know that the percentage of home ownership is going to decrease over the years. And, I think it's been labelled by some as generation rent. We do want, and I guess that's one of the reasons why this pet stuff has changed, right? What we're trying to do is create longer term rentals that people treat more as a home rather than just a short term kind of thing. So that tenure, that security of tenure. Um, but as properties are, particularly if they're older properties, more than 10 years old, how do you demonstrate ongoing compliance if, let's say, the tenancy lasts 5 years and you haven't looked? That's a bit of a challenge. So what we're sort of saying is older properties should probably be reassessed every 2 to 3 years.
yeah.
And if it's a newer property, so less than 10 years old, we're sort of saying every 3 to 4 years. And the reason for that is, whilst it doesn't categorically say you need to recheck, by saying that you need to be able to demonstrate that you're always compliant, what they're expecting you to do is have a mechanism for kind of basically knowing that you're compliant. And if you're not looking and you don't have a process, it's going to be pretty difficult to argue that you are. And what we're seeing at the moment is, um, given the fact that we started this service in 2019, we have still got clients that send us periodically, they send us updates to, they might have, let's say we did the report in 2019, and then we get an email from them, we get something come through the portal to say, oh, look, I've just installed the heat pump 6 years later. You're like, okay, that's 6 years old, that report now. You probably need to have another look at the house. But if they're having a conflict with a tenant, often what happens is the tenant might try and organise their own assessment. And if there's a difference between what the tenant's report says and what the owner's report says, and the owner's report is 6 years old or 4 years old or 3 years old or whatever it is, if this report is newer and shows gaps and this ends up in tribunal, that's the likely scenario that the adjudicator is going to look at. That's what's going to carry the weight,
Yeah.
which is frustrating. And I guess the key thing is that there are some elements of the compliance requirements that just aren't going to change that much, right? But there are others that frequently change, and it kind of depends on the structure of the house and where it's located. If it's close to a coastal environment, or if it has a lot of storms, or if it's close to vegetation, or if it's an older
Mm,
house, perhaps the land's moving around a bit. Insulation's a real problem, doesn't last forever, degrades. You've got rats, vermin, birds, people installing things that, sections drop out. Mechanical ventilation starts to deteriorate over time. Gaps and holes start to develop over time. Houses move and flex during the seasons. There's all this sort of stuff
wow.
that happens. So it's kind of, so the argument is really you want to be keeping a close eye on it.
Mm,
Because again, we don't want to be losing those gains that we've made over the last 6 years because now we've got a much better housing stock for rentals.
yeah.
How do we?
Oh, definitely.
Mm,
Definitely. And I have seen that develop, but the good old DIY number 8 wire. attitude needs to be gone, I think, and
Yeah.
that's what I see as part of a property manager's role. So I'm dismayed to see no. Oh, sorry, I might have a question. What do we got here? What are the typical items that auditors are picking up on? That's from Neil Williams.
Oh, good. That's a good question. One of the interesting ones. So we had a technical issue recently where MB were constantly picking up the fact that we hadn't said. So if wall insulation is unknown, we were supposed rather than leaving it blank, we needed to say unknown. So we had that issue recently. They seem to be obsessed with that. Obviously, when you're doing a heating assessment and you have a construction decade or a construction era, you can use that to do it gives you an approximation because they can sort of say, in wall insulation in 1970s was 1.2 or whatever it was. That was something that came up over and over and over again. So we made some changes to our system and we actually specifically now put unknown, rather than leaving it blank. They seem to be obsessed with that. So that
Right.
came up very, very frequently. What else has come up frequently? If it's a newer property and that what they want R value, thickness, and an insulation statement. That's something that's come up very, very frequently, which is challenging, particularly if the house has changed hands. So let's say it's a relatively new property. I think it was less than 5 years. It's come up a lot. So where, the insulation statement may not be in the manhole or in the access hole, and the new owner may not know what was installed or may not have the invoice or that sort of thing. So they were really asking us for R value, thickness, and the installation statement, really all of that information. In some cases, some of that wasn't known, so it was creating a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
So that kind of often requires a little bit more digging. So that comes up quite frequently.
No,
Um,
that's a good
yeah,
question. So, well, look, I think we can probably wrap it up there. If anybody else has got, oh, I might have another question. Yes, I do. So, anonymous attendee, that's an unusual name. Can you confirm all rental properties must have healthy homes compliance now? Does this mean they must have proof of compliance before they can be advertised on Trade Me, or does compliance proof just have to be in place at the start of the tenancy?
that's a great question. That's probably quite a legal question. So there'll have to be a line that I draw in the sand because obviously we can't provide legal advice, but the expectation is obviously that the property is compliant by the time the tenancy commences and that the owner and the owner's agent has reasonable evidence of such compliance. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to provide it proactively. Obviously, you need to provide the Section 13A statement, plus all of the other requirements that are in the standard tenancy agreement.
Mhm.
But my understanding is there's no expectation that you would proactively provide a full copy of the report to prospective tenants. They can, of course, ask for it. My understanding is that it's MB. I think they have to, if they ask, you have to provide it within 10 days, and I think tenants it's within 20 days. But that's pretty uncommon. The
Yeah.
way of communicating compliance to a tenant is through the Section 13A statement, which is as part of it forms part of the tenancy agreement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Couple of good questions today. I think this is quite a hot topic, really, because my feeling is that initially it was seen as a bit of a pain having to deal with all this stuff, and now I think people are becoming more aware of the upside of it.
Mm,
It's kind of like having your car serviced properly rather than bolting it together.
yeah,
So, and you've certainly given us a few educational points to ponder, but it's becoming a very important part of the property manager's job to be
absolutely.
compliant. Yeah, and the property owner as well. It's one of their obligations that they still think they can dodge if they can dodge that bullet. So I don't have any other questions for you at the moment, Adam. I think you've pretty much covered it. Shot it down. It's very good.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it doesn't have to be particularly complicated. It can, and I do think that owners who are very reluctant to take healthy homes seriously are kind of doing the property manager a bit of a favor, because they're kind of outing themselves as potentially being someone that's going to be a real challenge to get investment from
Yeah.
when things do go wrong. Because ultimately, a rental property is a business, and
Yes, it is.
the
Uh,
tenants are the client. There's a whole lot of rules and regulations that you need to follow to make
mm,
sure that they're not being taken advantage of, and obviously a whole lot of rules that the tenant has to comply with to satisfy the owner. But ultimately, it's a business, and it won't always pay you. Sometimes it's a case of having to put funds in, and I think that owners who don't understand that, or don't understand that dynamic, they are probably not for this industry.
yeah, I think it's a show of strength that as a property manager you will not accept a property to look after that is not compliant.
Yeah,
And I've had owners who've actually just said, "No, I'm not doing it," and you go, "Well, I'm not doing it either. So here's your keys.
yeah,
We're going to have to
inquire elsewhere.
yeah, going to
Yeah,
have to give them
they're kind of
additional
outing
money."
themselves as being problematic.
Yes.
What happens if they're running a really tight financial operation, and
Mm.
the water heater, the hot water cylinder goes, and they're up for $1,500, $2,000? Is that going to be a challenge for them? Are they going to be asking, to delay the repairs while they amass more rent? I mean, I think that I've seen some incredibly successful landlords in our time, and certainly the common denominator is those who invest, strategically and treat it as a long-term business. And if they've got great tenants, they look after those great tenants, and they invest in the property. And I think the payoff, happens not only over the life of that property, but also if they ever go to sell it.
Yeah,
But
it's
it requires
a must.
investment. It's certainly not an ATM machine. There are some challenges and complexities along the way, but who doesn't want a great tenant, a trouble-free tenancy, a great property, happy tenants? Who doesn't want those things?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, Adam. That's fantastic. It's good information, vital information for property managers, old and new. I am an old property manager, and that was bloody helpful, to be honest.
Right.
So
Happy to
thank you
help.
for that. Thanks for the turning up at the webinar this morning, and a couple of questions from the floor was good. Please check out the RPMA website for the next webinar, which is in October. I think it's October the 23rd, and the last one is in November. So we're always covering good topics, and we'll accept suggestions for ones that we've missed. So
Awesome.
thanks for coming along, guys. We really appreciate it. And thanks again, Adam. That was brilliant.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Enjoy the day, guys.